So today was the big reveal stream that UB does every season where they show off the new heroes, new map, hero improvements, and more. And in this stream, they talked about a ton of stuff, so much stuff that it took me longer than usual to get this video up, so I apologize for that. But man, do we have a lot to talk about today. So this is my recap vid. I'm going to try and talk about all of the important stuff while giving my thoughts on it real quick. Before we start, if you do watch these videos regularly, I would really appreciate it if you sub to the channel, as it really helps me out. Now that that's out of the way, let's not waste any more time and get right into it. Alright, so starting things off, let's talk about this new hero. This hero is interesting in a few ways. A few of the things we saw coming, but the stamina management thing came out of nowhere to me. I also wasn't expecting them to hold the hammer in one hand while locked on, but it does make sense when we look at their kit. So this hero, just like the other Year 3 heroes so far, doesn't have a huge moveset. It's pretty small, and they also only have 2-hit chains. The light attacks are enhanced, meaning that they don't bounce on block, and the light finishers are undodgeable, which is pretty interesting. I know all the deflect gods out there are pretty happy about this. Opener heavies do have hyper armor, and heavy finishers are unblockable, so Yorm does have most special attack properties in this game in some way, in enhanced lights, undodgeables, hyper armor, and unblockables, which is pretty nice. According to Yubi, their strategy revolves around draining your opponent's stamina, trying to knock them down, and then go in for the hammer slam. Yorm has a few bashes that will do stamina damage to their opponent. One from neutral that does 40 stam damage and flows into a chain, but the follow-up attack isn't guaranteed, which is pretty nice. They have a mid-chain punch that drains 45 stamina. They have a follow-up bash off of a parry that does 30 stamina damage, which paired along with the stamina your opponent lost from being parried will leave them pretty low on stamina. And then they have a bash off of guard break, which does 45 stamina damage and can be followed up with a guaranteed light attack or a throw. Now, once you do get your opponent out of stamina, all of these stamina draining moves will put your opponent on the ground and allow you to follow up with the 50 damage hammer slam. One thing we saw a lot from Yorm is that they aim below the belt a lot, which you can do with that what you will. Now let's move on to these feats. Feat 1 grants you health every time you land a stamina draining move. Feat 2 gives you a temporary shield every time you land a hammer slam. Feat 3 allows you to throw your hammer at your opponent. If the hammer connects, they'll instantly go out of stamina, putting them in a dangerous position. And then Feat 4 is a huge AoE ground pound that knocks down all opponents in the area. These feats are pretty solid, and it allows you to stay alive longer with the temporary shield and healing from Feats 1 and 2. Feat 3 is a good one because it instantly puts your opponent in a situation where they cannot get hit by any of those stamina draining moves or guard break, because if they do, they're going to eat a ton of damage. And of course, Feat 4 is really cool to look at and is very self-explanatory. This one is going to be a solid feat as well. Overall, I like the way this character looks. It looks like they'll be fun to play for a while. I still wonder how they'll play with other heroes and how they feel while you're actually using them. There is no new mechanic with this hero, as this is stuff that we've already seen before, but I mean, that's not really a bad thing. I am glad that the hammer sounds really good, and I'm also glad that the side heavy finishers push your opponents around when it lands. I don't really have much to say because there isn't much to the hero. You know what you're trying to do and how you can get there. Again, I know this hero will be fun to play, so I'll just have to wait a week to get my hands on them before I can really say anything else. One thing I do know is that there will be a lot of Centurion comments on this video. Next up, let's talk about these game and hero improvements. I'm not going to lie, I thought we'd only see changes on 3 heroes, but they did smaller quality of life changes on a bunch of heroes, and I did not see that coming. First, I want to talk about the biggest change in my opinion, and those are the escape changes. I'm glad that these changes are finally here and they look good. Yubi's goals with these changes were to stop people from rolling away from mix-ups, make escaping combat a bit more dangerous, and make it to where opponents can't strafe away from you faster than you can strafe towards them. I'll leave the patch notes in the pinned comment if you want to read everything. But in short, heroes who were stopped by just rolling away will have an easier time. You'll be able to catch people who try to roll away much easier than before, which should make heroes like Shigoki better. On top of this, there were plenty of character changes, some buffs, some nerfs. Again, I'm not going to go over everything because there's just so much, and I don't want this video being 30 minutes long, so I'll be sure to pin the patch notes in the comments. So starting off with Orochi, in short, they sort of just made him faster. First thing I noticed is that they finally got an attack that isn't at a 100 millisecond interval. His top light is now 466 milliseconds instead of 500. Same thing with his zone and chain light finisher. His top light will now do 12 damage instead of 15, and the follow-up top light will do 6 damage instead of 7, so a small damage nerf there. They sped up his recoveries on his top heavy attacks. They allow him to chain from Riptide Strike even after whiffing. They sped up his forward dodge light to 566 milliseconds, and they've updated all side attacks so it's easier to hit external targets. According to Yubi, these changes should make him a bit more powerful in 1v1 and be less vulnerable when throwing out attacks. These changes aren't really a bad thing, but they aren't really what he needed. Even if he's sped up a bit, that doesn't really address the fact that he's not really helpful in 4v4 and has a tough time opening up opponents who can defend themselves well. I thought that we'd see some sort of bash or kick or maybe even an unblockable, but instead they just sped him up. Sort of confusing to me because those who already had a tough time blocking against Orochi will just have a tougher time blocking a few of his attacks. But those who can block his attacks consistently won't really be bothered by this slight speed increase. I don't think anyone asked for faster Orochi lights, but here they are. I'm not going to harp on this for long. These changes are technically good, but I'm sure that everyone would have rather saw something that addresses his flaws. Next up, Shinobi. I know some Shinobi mains are swinging in the air right now because we all thought that he'd receive some more work than this. I think a lot of us agreed that he needed a full-out rework, but that didn't happen. Instead, we see that the armor on backflip, roll, double dodge kick, kick after roll and deflect, sprint slide, and sickle rain have all been removed. I thought they were going to just remove the armor on backflip and sickle rain, but they removed it on the kicks as well. On top of this, his range grab no longer beats revenge activation, his sprint slide only has active hit frames for 400 milliseconds instead of 600, and his opponents can activate revenge during the hit. The only buff he got was a buff to his reflex guard. It's now 1100 milliseconds instead of 800. So they removed some of the annoying things about Shinobi, not everything, but some of it. They didn't touch his damage values or anything like that, which I mean is good for Shinobi players as he's still got that going for him. He can still also do the things he could do before, just without all the armor on everything. This makes him less safe and gets rid of that insane sickle rain that could eliminate opponents instantly. Nobushi got some changes as well. As expected, hidden stance was tweaked. Nobu can no longer guard break while in hidden stance. A solid change there that I'm sure no one will really mind. Hidden stance won't stop stamina regen for 4 seconds anymore. Light attacks from hidden stance will now hide the first 100 milliseconds of the attack. That'll be interesting to see in action. They've increased the range on heavy attacks from hidden stance. All hidden stance heavies will now deal 35 damage, and branching from hidden stance heavies to kicks will now start 100 milliseconds later, which removes the guaranteed kick on block. On top of that, her bleed attacks will now stack, and they've reduced her bleed damage to 12 from 20. Dodge branches to Cobra Strike from 200 milliseconds to 400 milliseconds. Same thing with the Sidewinder. Also, Sidewinder recovery is now 1000 milliseconds from 1300. She can branch from Sidewinder to Hidden Stance starting at 500 milliseconds instead of 1000, and it branches into Dodge, Retreating, Viper, and Kick starting at 500 milliseconds instead of 400. They've also sped up her kick slightly to 566 milliseconds, and Kick now has 100 milliseconds of guard break vulnerability from startup. Retreating Viper is now 500 milliseconds instead of 600, and you can dodge forward during its recovery. She also had her top heavy damage reduced from 38 to 32, and to compensate, they buffed her damage on side heavy openers and finishers. And finally, Swift Recoil has been removed. So, she had quite a few changes. I'm excited to see how this affects her in both 1v1s and 4v4s. Valkyrie surprisingly got a few changes. I was not expecting this. Her heavy damage has been buffed a bit. Heavy openers will now do 28 damage, and the second heavy will now do 30. The sweep recovery is now 700 milliseconds, which is really nice. Zone attack recovery has been sped up, and shield crush has had its dodge window reduced to 200 milliseconds from 300. On top of this, shield tackle will now strike at 400 milliseconds instead of 500, but the backwards movement has been reduced to 0.5 meters, so we probably won't be avoiding everything with it anymore. And the sweep and its follow-up will no longer keep Valk's opponents from popping revenge. These changes all needed to be done, and I'm glad that UB paid some attention to the remaining Valks out there. There were just so many changes. I'm not going to go over all of them, but some of the remaining highlights to me were that Kinsei has some faster sidelights and some damage buffs. Tiandi has a lot of recovery changes so that he's not just standing around all the time. Lawbringer's sidelight finishers will be 800 milliseconds. Shugo's Demon's Embrace will only heal for 20 health instead of 25. Berserker had a small damage nerf on lights following a feint. Warden will have an easier time hitting minions. JJ had his Sifu pose backwards movement reduced to 0.75 meters. Aramusha now has more forward movement in his heavy finisher feints, and so on. So be sure to check out the notes. The one thing I'm surprised about though is that we didn't see Gladiator get his guard standardized along with Shinobi, but maybe we'll see that in Season 12. A few feats are also receiving some changes. Second Wind and Inspire now have 120-second cooldowns. Tough as Nails had its max health multiplier nerfed to 1.15, and Body Count will now heal for 2 health and give 2 stamina per minion. Now that we're done with the fight stuff, I'm going to quickly go into everything else. We are getting a new breach map called Store Stronghold, and as expected, it looks absolutely amazing. We're getting a bunch of new weapons as with every new season. They showed off spectator mode for a bit and it looks a lot better than I thought it would. And they let us know that there will be something called the Testing Grounds that will replace the old public test server that we haven't seen be used in forever now. The good thing about Testing Grounds is that it'll work on all platforms instead of just PC, and you don't need to download anything at all. It'll be playable from the live game whenever it's available for everyone. And finally, the game will be available for free on PC through the Epic Games Store starting on August 2nd, and that'll be running on until the 9th. So if you don't have For Honor on PC yet, now's the time to grab it. And that was just about everything. There was a lot. I tried to condense it down into 10 to 15 minutes. If you wish to read everything that's to come gameplay wise, be sure to check out those notes in the pinned comment. And if you just want to talk about all that stuff, feel free to join our Discord. The link will be in the description. Anyways, that's all I've got for this video. Season 11 is looking like it's going to be pretty good. I'm glad that there's so much coming to the game. I am a little bummed out that Nobushi, Orochi, and Shinobi didn't really get huge changes, but I'll probably talk about that another time. As usual, I want to hear you guys' opinions, so talk to me down in the comments about anything we talked about in this video. And as always, if you like the video, feel free to leave a like and sub if you're new, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.